Welcome to the temple. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the video. Throughout human history, we've struggled to make sense of the world we live in. We tell each other stories, construct elaborate belief systems, ask others to join our cause if for no other reason than to feel less alone. The journey from band-level groups to tribes, to nation-states and beyond has been a tumultuous ride, and an achievement worth celebrating. But we're not entirely out of the woods yet. As we move away from the industrial age and into the age of information, our desire for answers to some of life's most prescient questions, like why are we here, don't go away. Our list of questions only grows longer. For millennia, wolves have been portrayed as evil creatures, primarily associated with death and destruction. From the ancient Egyptian god Anubis ushering souls into the afterworld, to depictions of wolves ravaging fallen soldiers on ancient battlegrounds, and of course popular fairy tales like Little Red Riding Hood. Wolves have come to represent humanity's dark side, unforgiving, ferocious guardians at the gates of hell. In fact, the Native American tribe, the Nazcapoes, believed that the caribou afterlife is guarded by giant wolves that kill careless hunters who venture too near. In Roman mythology, we recall the story of Romulus and Remus, who were to be killed by their uncle, Amulius, giving the task of the murder to one of his servants. The servant instead set the twins in a cradle and had the Tiber River carry them off, leading to their adoption by a she-wolf known as Lupa. They would become the future founders of Rome. In more recent times, wolves have experienced some positive representation in the popular culture, namely as a warrior class of animal in Disney's 1962 The Legend of Lobo and in Hayao Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke. In the former, a professional hunter is hired to kill the roaming wolves that are terrorizing the domestic animals of a rancher's land in Texas. In the end, the wolves escape the grasp of the hunter, realizing that humankind has encroached too far into their territory and they must find a new home. In the latter film, the wolf goddess Moro, acting as nature's custodian, attacks the humans laying waste to her forest. In response, the adults throw their young daughter San to Moro as a sacrifice to save their lives, consequently resulting in San treating Moro as her adopted mother. Together, alongside Moro's two sons, they tried to prevent human industry from expanding into the surrounding forest. At first, San identifies wholly as a wolf. However, with time, she comes to recognize her human side as well. That said, and I'm skipping a lot, San can't forgive the humans for what they did to her home, and so returns to the forest. Again, a similar narrative, humans moving into historically sacred land, destroying it, and then eventually forcing out the animals who stay to fight. By giving the animals a human quality, in this case an actual human ally to fight back with, their story becomes a lot more pertinent. But that's not the story we'll be talking about today. Our story begins with Espantosa Lake. Innocuous enough, right? The name loosely translates from Spanish as fearful or haunted. In some circles commonly referred to as the Lake of the Ghost. But why? The history of this particular early American settler lake is extensive, far too extensive to cover here, but we will take a look at one story in particular that occurred near the Espantosa, and it involves a wolf girl. Not a werewolf, more of a feral kid kind of thing, but a true early American folk legend. And it all started in Georgia in the year Joseph Smith established the Church of Mormon, 1830. It was fall of 1830 in Georgia. John Dent and Will Marlowe had just set up as partners in the fur trade along the Chickamauga River. They had a good relationship those first years, but as spring 1833 rolled around, things took a turn for the worse, and the two had an argument over the distribution of their winter catch. If you've seen The Revenant, you understand how important those pelts can be. Unbeknownst to Marlowe, Dent had been carrying on an affair with a local mountaineer's daughter. Her name was Molly Pertul. John was in love with Molly and had asked her to marry him during his third season on Chickamauga. Now, Dent and Marlowe had sold their pelts jointly and split the money equally for 2 years. After Molly entered the picture, Dent had other ideas and believed he could demand more money if he sold his half of the pelts independently. He needed the money, you see. His plan was to start a new life with Molly. Unfortunately, Marlowe saw Dent's proposal as underhanded and refused his request, spurring a heated argument between the two, which eventually left Dent with his desired division of fur. But that wasn't the end of Marlowe. He quickly began railing against Dent any chance he got, He wouldn't drop the claim that Dent had cheated him and would do the same to anyone else he crossed. 2 weeks passed, and finally Dent, understandably offended by his ex-partner's ravings, decided to confront him. Well, as far as confrontations go, this one got a little out of hand, with Dent stabbing Marlowe to death. The townsfolk knew who was responsible, and Dent left Georgia in a hurry. But before he was gone, he told Molly he'd find a suitable place for them to live together and then return to bring her with him. Exactly 1 year later, on April 13, 1834, John Dent quietly returned to Chickamauga. There hadn't been any correspondence between the young lovers during their time apart, so it was just as much a surprise for Molly as it was for her parents when she didn't return home after milking the cows that day. You see, Molly had been on her daily milk run when Dent arrived. Having become aware of her unnaturally long absence, Molly's parents discovered the cows unmilked and, in an empty milk pail, a Bowie knife, later identified as the knife Dent had used to kill Marlowe. Molly was gone. Of course, her parents and other local mountaineers set out as a search party, but without any luck. 6 months later, Molly's mother would receive the most peculiar of letters. It read, "Dear Mother, the devil has a river in Texas that is all his own, and it is made only for those who are grown. Yours with love, Molly." Now, where exactly was the young married couple living? The United States wasn't exactly united back then. Devil's River lay to the far west of San Antonio, host to an almost exclusively Spanish-speaking community. At this point in time, Texas was still under Mexican rule, and Spanish was encouraged in the region. There was, however, briefly, in 1834, a small British settler outpost called Dolores that set up nearby. It didn't last long. Native Indians lay slaughter to this group, killing most of them. The few survivors, 14 adults and 3 children, moved south toward Mexico, but were cut off by roaming Comanches at Espantosa Lake. None survived the second attack. After the English colonists were dead, they were loaded up on the very wagons on which they were traveling and shoveled into the lake. Now, Dent and Molly had joined this English settlement, but lived separately, setting up their own camp at least half a mile away. It's believed that Dent had some sort of an arrangement with the Indians, a tax he was paying, this being the reason his and Molly's life were spared. West of Dent's camp, there lived a few Mexican families who owned a couple of goat ranches. At noon someday in May of 1835, Dent arrived at one of these ranches looking for help. He explained that his wife had gone into labor, and he needed a hand delivering the baby. He pleaded with the locals to send one of their women with him. One of the Mexican men agreed to bring his wife. The 3 would set out together. In the skies above, a storm loomed. The clouds, heavy and dark, gave the party pause. As the skies rumbled above them, the Mexican couple began saddling up their horse for the journey. Yet before they had a chance to get going, Dent was struck by a bolt of lightning and died immediately, delaying Molly's would-be helpers a great deal. Luckily, before Dent had been killed, he had described his camp to the ranchers, but night fell before the rancher and his wife were able to reach Devil's River. They didn't find the camp until the next morning. By that time, it was too late. Before them in the open brush lay Molly Pertool, dead. There was clear evidence that she had given birth, but by the looks of the track marks surrounding the camp, the infant had been eaten by lobos. Lobo meaning wolf in Spanish. There was no baby, only track marks. Molly's child was gone. The Mexican Samaritans scoured the small cabin nearby and found a letter Molly had penned to her mother weeks earlier. This is the only identifying evidence that the unfortunate couple was in fact John Dent and Molly Pertool. 10 years passed, and in 1845, in a new and independent Texas, a road had been built across the new republic to El Paso via San Felipe Springs. Scattered along this new wagon crossing, not far from Devil's River, lived the same Mexican goat farmers. That year, a boy living at San Felipe Springs reported seeing a pack of wolves attacking a herd of goats, something that happened from time to time. However, the boy claimed that running with the pack was what appeared to be a naked girl, her features obscured by long locks of dark hair. Initially, the story was ridiculed, but quickly spread across the settlements in the region. Within a year of this first incident, again in San Felipe, a Mexican woman claimed to have seen a similar sight. She saw 2 large lobos and a naked girl eating a freshly killed goat. She managed to get up close to them before they became aware of her and ran off. The woman was positive she had seen a girl with the wolves. This latest sighting gave the community pause. They recalled the memory of Molly Dent's missing infant and the lobo tracks 10 years before. Some of the men of the camp spoke of how female lobos carry their cubs by the scruff of their neck without injuring them. Soon after this, Indians reported seeing handprints alongside barefoot tracks in the sandy embankments of the river. Now, there also exists a rare skin condition called sarcoptic mange, or more colloquially, the 7-year itch. Mites dig into the skin, causing an allergic reaction, and subsequent itching causing hair loss and crusting. Basically, if a wolf had this kind of problem, it would be a weird-looking creature, and might even result in a misidentification of some sort. But this wasn't on the minds of those who heard the story of the wolf girl. In fact, at this point, there was already some hysteria within the community, and eventually the people resolved to capture the wolf girl. The hunt would be headed by Mexican vaqueros. Now, you've probably heard of the man in the moon phenomenon, or spotting the Virgin Mary between the folds of a grilled cheese sandwich. This sort of pattern recognition is programmed in us from infancy. And let's not forget about the various social and cultural filters that process these events. The phenomenon is called pareidolia, and it means seeing faces in almost anything. In a recent brain imaging study published in the journal Cortex, volunteers were shown noise images composed of black, white, and gray blobs and dots, and then told that half of the images contained hard-to-detect faces. After being shown a noise image, the participant would press a button indicating whether or not a face was seen. The trick? There were actually no detectable faces in any of the images. The result? Well, as you might imagine, the volunteers still saw a lot of faces. According to Yale anthropologist Weston LaBarre, a surprisingly good case could be made that much of culture is hallucination, and the whole intent and function of ritual appears to be a group wish to hallucinate reality. The truth is, people lie, make mistakes, and sometimes even see things that aren't there. Back to the story. On the 3rd day of the hunt, the girl was spotted. 2 of the riders managed to isolate her in a canyon. They cornered her and moved in slowly. The girl hissed and spat at the men. She fought while they tried to tie her up, biting and scratching, and finally drew from deep within her a sound they say resembled the scream of a woman and the howl of a wolf. A piercing sound that apparently drew one of the wolves back into the crevice where the men had subdued the girl. The wolf charged the men, and at the last second was killed by the quick pistol of a vaquero. So the story goes. At the sight of her fallen brethren, the girl collapsed. With the girl captured and safely tied up, she could finally be examined. It was found that she was a normal human female, extraordinarily hairy, and possessing, although large, appropriate-sized musculature. Upon examining the young creature, she awoke from her loss of consciousness and was placed on a horse and carried back to camp. Well, I know we mentioned the face phenomenon and the itch theory earlier, but with the girl finally caught and examined, that theory gets thrown out the window, right? Well, maybe. Upon their return, the girl was unbound and placed in an isolated room for the night. She was given water, food, and a cover for her naked body. She spoke no language, and apparently eyed her captors with contempt. The room had 1 door and 1 window. The door was locked, and the window had been boarded up. 5 men surrounded the tiny hut. As night fell, the girl again began to howl, only this time her calls were summarily answered from the darkness beyond the vaqueros' camp. The wolf girl's howls penetrated the uneven wood slats of her temporary isolation chamber, and lobos could be heard calling in the distance. The lobo calls rang closer and increased in number, bringing a morose mood over the camp. As the wolves drew nearer, their howls would cease while they waited for the wolf girl to return their sad song. It is said this back and forth went on for some time before the wolves eventually entered the camp, attacking horses, goats, and cows, drawing the men out to defend their property. The screams and cries of the domestic animals being attacked, coupled with the sound of gunshots, is said to have created enough of a distraction for the wolf girl to pry away the crossplank covering the window and escape. As the men collected themselves, working as a unit firing into the darkness, the wolves retreated. The girl was gone. That same year, Texas became the 28th state of the United States of America. During this time, gold was discovered in California, and the push from east to west across the New World increased significantly. The Wolf Girl wasn't heard from for another 6 years. In 1852, while traveling en route to El Paso, a group of exploring frontiersmen rode to the Rio Grande at the mouth of Devil's River. As they came to the water's edge, they saw, sitting on a sandbar, 2 young wolf cubs suckling on a young woman's full breasts. As soon as she caught sight of the men, the wolf girl ran into the brush and was never seen again. Only just over a decade later, during the War of Extermination, thousands of lobos were killed to near extinction, seen as a menace to cattle farming, given authority by Congress to be killed. The idea of the girl not being eaten by wolves but instead rescued from a hopeless situation and cared for like one of the wolves' own reads like a form of wish fulfillment. The wish being that nature, the wild in general, has humanity's best interest at heart. For a group of foreign settlers moving across a new, and as yet, unknown continent, the wolf girl came to represent a wild but noble morality. Perhaps the hope that the natural world wasn't entirely malicious, but at the very least, neutral. These sorts of stories also act as a form of distraction. Let's consider the political and cultural realities of the time. Texas, in the space of a couple of years, went from Mexican rule to an autonomous republic and then back under the rule of another behemoth in the form of the United States of America. A tumultuous time, to say the least. So it seems what occurred at Devil's River was a collective fear of the crossing of the frontier, a new world at the edge of a primal sense of unknowing. With great change comes great resistance, and Texas in the mid-1800s wasn't any different. In the case of the Lobo Girl, it was easier to pass the phenomenon off as a wolf girl, rather than accept the reality of change thrust upon the region, with little political influence from its native populations. Although conceivable to some by the power of suggestion and group hysteria, Devil River's Wolf Girl seems likely to live simply as paranoid thought, made manifest by a rapidly and often resentful boundary-dissolving mind. You see, the New World had officially arrived. The old minds coming into contact with that new world, however, were still only catching up. People want to believe. They want to fulfill their heart's desires by wishing something to be true. Folklore can be seductive for this very reason, offering the satisfaction required for a severe spiritual hunger. In this specific case, perhaps a promise that the wild isn't as wild as we think it is.